He was a killer, standing over a state trooper he'd bound and doused in gasoline. He smiled and raised the lighter, a flick of his thumb away from burning her alive. But he never saw the two shapes moving in the gloom. And what the Navy SEAL and his loyal dog did next would change all of their lives forever. The neon heart of Pittsburgh was a distant, lurid glow against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. A feverish promise of life that seemed 1,000 miles away. Out here, in the rolling, wooded hills of rural Pennsylvania, the only sound was the whispering scrape of the wind as it combed through the skeletal branches of late autumn trees and over the damp, mossy shale of an abandoned quarry. The day's meager warmth had bled from the ground, replaced by the sharp, penetrating cold that defined a November night in the Alleghenies. This was a land of stark, unforgiving beauty, and it was exactly where Jack Corbin wanted to be. Jack Corbin was a man carved from the same hard material as the landscape around him. An active-duty Navy SEAL, he was a study in controlled strength, with a lean, powerful frame and eyes the color of hard steel. He wore standard-issue woodland fatigues, the fabric practical and durable against the elements. He wasn't here for leisure but for training, pushing his body and mind to their limits in the kind of solitude only the vast, empty wilderness could provide. The crunch of his boots on the gravel was a rhythmic beat, his breath pluming in small white clouds in the rapidly chilling air. He was a man who lived in a state of permanent readiness, his entire being tuned to a frequency of discipline few could comprehend. Beside him, moving with a silent, powerful grace, was Ranger. A 3-year-old German Shepherd, Ranger was a magnificent example of his breed. His coat was a classic black and tan, his frame large and muscular, and his intelligent eyes held an almost human depth. He was no pet. He was a partner, a 4-legged extension of Jack's will, trained to a razor's edge. The bond between them was absolute, forged in simulated chaos and total trust. As they ran along the quarry ridge, the dog's big paws made almost no sound, his focus as sharp as his master's. Suddenly, Ranger stopped. It wasn't a gradual halt. It was as if his paws had become bolted to the rock. His head snapped to the left, his noble ears erect, his entire body rigid. A low rumble, a sound Jack had only ever heard in the most intense training scenarios, vibrated deep in his chest. Jack froze instantly, his hand dropping to the Glock holstered at his hip. "Easy, bud. What is it?" Ranger ignored the command, his concentration unbreakable. He tasted the air, his black nose twitching. Then he moved, not running, but slinking low to the ground, disappearing behind a towering slab of granite. Jack followed, his own movements becoming equally fluid, his eyes scanning the rapidly darkening landscape. The wind had shifted, and it carried something new, something that didn't belong here. The smell of gasoline. The blood in Jack's veins ran cold. He rounded the granite slab, his weapon now drawn and held low. The scene that greeted him was a snapshot from a nightmare. In a small clearing, illuminated by the harsh white beam of a portable utility lamp, a woman was tied to a rusted steel derrick, the remnant of some old drilling operation. She was in the tattered remains of civilian clothes, but the defiant, terrified set of her jaw told Jack she was a fighter. This was Anna Riley, a Pennsylvania state trooper. Though Jack didn't know it, he just saw her clear blue eyes, wide with terror, and the dark, wet patches soaking her shirt and jeans. The acrid stench of gasoline rose from her in waves. Standing a few feet from her was a man. He was tall and thin, dressed in dark utility clothing, his features obscured by a low pulled ball cap. He was a nondescript figure, which somehow made him more terrifying. He held a small, Zippo-style lighter in one hand. He was speaking to her, his voice too low for Jack to make out the words, but the tone was mocking, devoid of any human empathy. This was a killer, a man whose soul had been hollowed out. Anna struggled against the ropes, her voice a raw, desperate rasp. "Please, please don't. You don't have to do this." The man laughed, a dry, clicking sound. "That's where you're wrong, officer. I really do." He raised the lighter, his thumb moving to the flint wheel. There was no time for a plan, no time for words. Jack had only one option. He gave the command, a single sharp syllable that cut through the wind. "Hunt." Ranger exploded from the shadows. He was no longer a dog. He was a projectile of muscle and fury. The killer heard the scuff of gravel a split second before 90 pounds of canine loyalty slammed into his side. The man screamed, a piercing shriek of surprise and pain as Ranger's powerful jaws locked onto his right arm, the one holding the lighter. The Zippo flew from his grasp, tumbling end over end and landing in the gas-splashed dirt. The world erupted in orange flame. "No!" Jack roared, but he was already moving. He didn't charge the killer. Ranger had that assignment. Jack sprinted toward the derrick, his combat boots kicking up dirt. The fire had caught on the pooled gasoline on the ground, creating a ring of fire around Anna, the flames dancing hungrily toward their intended fuel. "Hold your breath," Jack commanded as he vaulted through the low flames, the heat searing his face. Anna had her eyes squeezed shut, her body trembling violently. He saw the knots, complex on her wrists and ankles. Amateur, but effective. His combat knife was in his hand in a fraction of a second. He sliced through the thick rope at her wrists with one practice cut. The fire was climbing the derrick now, licking the air just inches from her boots. "I've got you," he grunted, severing the ankle bindings. The ropes fell away. Anna collapsed forward and Jack caught her, shielding her with his body from the worst of the heat. He wrapped one arm around her waist, hoisted her up with an adrenaline-fueled growl, and plunged back through the weakest part of the fire line, pulling her clear just as the flames engulfed the patch of ground where she'd been standing. He didn't stop until they were 20 yards away, collapsing behind a low juniper bush. Anna was coughing, gasping for air that wasn't thick with smoke. Jack's head snapped back to the fight. It was over. Ranger had the man flat on his back, his teeth clamped on the man's shoulder, pinning him to the ground. The man was whimpering, his free hand trying uselessly to push the massive dog's head away. Ranger held his ground, his growl a constant, terrifying promise of what he could do. "Good boy, Ranger." "Hold," Jack commanded, his voice calm and cold. The dog obeyed, not releasing his grip but ceasing his shaking. Jack walked to the subdued killer, his weapon leveled. "You move, I let him finish you." The man, his face now visible in the firelight, was pale and sweating, his eyes darting between Jack and the dog. He nodded, panting. Jack quickly bound the man's hands behind his back with a pair of zip ties from his belt. Only then did he retrieve the man's weapon, a holstered pistol, and the fallen lighter. He left the killer there, neutralized and guarded by the still growling German shepherd, and went back to Anna. She was on her hands and knees trying to get up, but she was shaking too hard. The combination of the gas-soaked clothes, the cold night air, and profound shock was sending her body into violent tremors. Jack knelt in front of her. "Are you hurt? Are you burned?" She looked up, her blue eyes still wide, but the terror was being replaced by a dazed spark of gratitude. I don't think so." It was so close. Her teeth were chattering. Jack looked at her, his expression unreadable, but his actions were clear. The fire was dying down, and the night was truly cold. Her wet clothes were a danger. Without a word, he unzipped his heavy woodland camo jacket. It was fleece-lined, built for harsh conditions, and held all of his body heat. He stood and draped it around her small, trembling shoulders, pulling the hood up over her head. The coat enveloped her, a heavy, warm shroud that smelled of crisp autumn air and safety, a stark contrast to the chemical scent of death she was still wearing. She clutched it to her chest, her small hands disappearing into the oversized sleeves. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Jack looked back at the fire, then at the man Ranger was guarding. "Name's Jack. And you're safe now." The last of the flames guttered out, leaving the clearing in a profound darkness, lit only by the glittering, cold, distant light of the stars. The thin man, now securely zip-tied, sat slumped against the rock where Ranger held him, his breathing ragged, but his eyes sharp and hateful. Anna, still wrapped in Jack's jacket, hadn't stopped shivering. The gasoline-soaked denim clung to her skin, and the biting Pennsylvania wind was siphoning her body heat at a dangerous rate. She was moving past shock and into the first stages of hypothermia. Jack made a swift assessment. He had an asset, a liability, and an unknown. Anna was the asset, but she was vulnerable. The tied-up man was the liability, an unknown threat, and the situation itself was the unknown. He had no idea who else was out here. Staying in this exposed clearing was tactical suicide. "We're moving," he said, his voice a low command that cut through the wind. He hauled the bound killer to his feet. "You're going to walk. If you stumble, he'll assist you." He nodded toward Ranger, whose low growl affirmed the promise. Jack then turned to Anna, his demeanor softening fractionally. "Can you walk?" Anna nodded, pushing herself up on unsteady legs. "I think so." But as she rose, her legs buckled. The adrenaline that had kept her going was fading. Jack caught her before she hit the ground, sweeping her up in a fireman's carry as if she weighed nothing. The move was so sudden, so efficient, it left her breathless. "Ranger, watch him," Jack commanded. They moved into the darkness. Ranger fell into position, 3 feet from the killer, herding him like livestock. The killer, feeling the dog's proximity, walked quickly, his hands bound tightly behind him. Anna, held securely on Jack's back, felt a strange, dizzying sense of safety. She was a trooper, tough and self-reliant, used to being the one in control. But in this moment, exhausted and terrified, she could feel the steady, powerful rhythm of Jack's breathing and the disciplined strength that held her aloft. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed, and allowed herself to be saved. Jack moved for 10 minutes through the rocky terrain, his steps sure in the near total darkness. He knew this patch of woods better than his own home. He finally stopped at what looked like a solid wall of shale, but he pushed aside a curtain of dry briars to reveal a narrow fissure in the rock, a box canyon no wider than a hallway that offered complete protection from the wind. He gently set Anna down inside, his eyes sweeping the small space before turning his attention to the prisoner. Jack pushed the man against the canyon wall and used a heavy-duty carabiner from his pack to secure the man's zip ties to an old, rusted iron bolt set in the stone, a relic of some long-gone rock climbers. "Don't move," Jack ordered. Ranger sat directly in front of the prisoner, head low, watching. With the threat contained, Jack turned back to Anna. The small canyon was still dark, but he retrieved a chemical light stick from his pack, snapped it, and a dim green luminescence filled the space. In the eerie light, he could see how pale she was, her lips tinged with blue. "You have to get out of those clothes," he said, his tone flat. "It's clinical." She just stared at him, too cold to argue. That wasn't a request. He opened a waterproof supply cache, a small barrel he kept hidden there, and pulled out a first aid kit, a Mylar thermal blanket, and a neatly folded set of black thermal underwear. "This is all I have," he said, handing her the clothes. "I'm going to check the perimeter. Change. Put your wet clothes in this bag." He handed her a plastic sack. He was giving her privacy, a small measure of dignity in an unimaginable situation. He disappeared back into the darkness. Anna, with numb, clumsy fingers, stripped off the gas-soaked denim and shirt, her skin stinging from the chemical residue. She quickly pulled on the thermals. They were men's size, far too large, but they were dry and incredibly warm. She wrapped herself in Jack's jacket again, which now felt like a shield. When Jack returned, he found her sitting on the ground, hugging her knees. He knelt in front of her, opening the first aid kit. "Let me see your hands." She held them out. The ropes had chafed her wrists raw, and small blisters were rising where the flames had come too close. He worked with a detached, clinical focus. His hands were large, crisscrossed with small scars, but his touch was surprisingly gentle and precise. He cleaned the raw skin with an antiseptic wipe, his movements economical, before applying a thin layer of burn salve and dressing her wrists in clean white gauze. "Ankles," he said. She lifted her leg and he did the same to her ankles, his touch never lingering, his focus entirely on the task. Anna watched his face in the green light. He had sharp, defined features and eyes that seemed to take in everything. She'd spent her career dealing with men who postured, men who threatened, and men who tried to charm. This man did none of that. He simply existed, a force of pure, controlled competence. And as he taped the last piece of gauze in place, the hard, defensive shell she'd built around herself finally cracked. She felt a wave of safety so profound it almost brought her to tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick. Jack just nodded, packing up his kit. His medic task complete, his demeanor shifted. The protector was gone, replaced by the interrogator. He rose and faced the prisoner, his shadow stretching long and menacing in the chemical light. "Who sent you?" Jack's voice was ice. "Why a cop?" The thin man, who had been watching them with a detached curiosity, just smirked. "Go to hell." Jack didn't react. He simply began to search the man, his hands moving with practiced skill, checking every pocket, seam, and hiding place. He pulled out a cheap wallet with cash but no ID, a set of car keys, and finally, strapped to the man's ankle beneath his pant leg, a combat knife in a Kydex sheath. Jack drew it. It was a beautiful, lethal thing, a 5-inch fixed blade coated in black titanium, perfectly balanced. He held it up, letting the green light catch the blade. "Wait." Anna's voice was sharp. Her cop's instincts, dormant for the last hour, had flared back to life. "Let me see that." The handle. Jack turned it over. Etched into the G10 handle was a small, precise logo, a stylized Spartan helmet formed from the letters V and S. Anna's breath hitched. Vance Strategic. Jack's body went completely still. He looked at her, his eyes suddenly intense. "You know it." "I know of them," Anna said, her mind racing. "High-end private security. They're based out of Pittsburgh. They handle logistics and protection for half the high rollers in the city. Rumor is they do quiet work for other clients, too. Why would a low-level hitman have a $200 custom piece from them?" Jack didn't answer. He just stared at the logo, his jaw tightening until a muscle jumped. "Trooper," he began. "Riley," she said. "Trooper Anna Riley, Pennsylvania State Police. And you? You're no hiker." "Jack. Just Jack." He clipped the knife to his own belt and knelt in front of her again, his gaze locking on hers. "You're investigating them?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Not directly. I was on something else. Something big." She took a deep breath, the words spilling out. "I was investigating arms trafficking. Military-grade hardware disappearing off a National Guard base, and not just rifles. I'm talking grenade launchers, javelins, stuff that could start a war." A sudden cold anger filled her eyes. "I followed the trail. It all pointed to one man, an international arms dealer. Victor Sterling." The name hung in the cold air. "I didn't have enough for a warrant," Anna continued, her voice low. "I told my partner. My partner, Ben," she said his name like it was poison. "I trusted him. He told me he had an informant, someone who could give us the last piece, and he set up a meet out here, in the middle of nowhere." She looked at Jack, her face a mask of bitter realization. "There was no informant, just him." She nodded toward the prisoner. "My partner? My partner set me up. He threw me to them." Jack took in the information, his mind connecting the data points with chilling speed. A decorated state trooper investigating a major arms dealer named Victor Sterling, betrayed by her own partner and left for dead. The killer, a professional, carrying a signature knife from Vance Strategic. He looked at the knife on his belt. Then he looked at Anna, her small frame swallowed by his jacket, her eyes defiant even in defeat. He knew with absolute certainty he couldn't hand her over to the state police. He had no idea how deep the rot went. "Your partner thinks you're dead," Jack said, his voice low. "The man who sent him," he glanced at the prisoner, "thinks you're dead. We need to keep it that way." "What? What do we do?" she asked. Jack stood, a solid silhouette against the dark rock. "You're not a cop anymore, Trooper. Not right now. You're a target, and you're with me." Anna looked at this quiet, intense stranger and his silent, watchful dog. In the deep woods of Pennsylvania, betrayed and hunted, she had found the one thing she thought was lost, an ally. She pulled the jacket tighter and gave a single, decisive nod. "Okay, Jack. What's the plan?" Jack's entire world narrowed to the small logo etched on the knife's handle. Vance Strategic. He was perfectly still. The kind of absolute stillness that precedes a violent explosion. The green chemical light seemed to flicker. Or maybe it was just the sudden, cold rage that flared behind his eyes. Anna, intuitive and trained to read the smallest tells, saw the shift instantly. The controlled, dispassionate protector was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. "Jack," she pressed, her voice quiet but firm. "That name, Vance Strategic, it means something to you." He didn't answer. He just stared at the knife. His mind was a vortex, pulling him back a decade. He saw a rain-lashed obstacle course in Coronado, a shared laugh in the back of a C-130 over an unnamed ocean, a desperate firefight in a dusty village. He saw the face of the man who had saved his life 3 times. "Cal," he whispered. The name tasted like ash in his mouth. He looked at the prisoner, who was watching this exchange with a flicker of calculated interest. Jack's expression turned to ice. He strode to the man and ripped the cheap wallet from his pocket, tossing it to Anna. "See if you know him." While she searched for an ID, Jack efficiently finished searching the hitman. He found a set of keys, a cheap burner phone, and nothing else. He pocketed the keys and the knife. He checked the phone. It was off. He snapped the phone in half with one clean, powerful twist of his hands and tossed the pieces onto the dirt. "Nothing," Anna said, looking up from the wallet. "No license, no cards, just cash." "Doesn't matter," Jack said. He unclipped a length of flex cuffs from his pack and knelt by the prisoner's legs. "What's your name?" The man just smirked. Jack shrugged and, with methodical speed, tightly bound the man's ankles. He checked the zip ties on his wrists, pulling them painfully tight, then stood. "Sun will be up in about 4 hours. The morning chill will keep you quiet. Someone will find you, or the vultures will." The hitman's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. "You can't just leave me here." "I can," Jack said, his voice flat. "And I will." He turned to Anna, his face grim. "We're compromised. That phone was off, but I won't assume it wasn't tracked. We go, now." He offered a hand to help her up. She took it, his grip strong and sure, and he pulled her to her feet with ease. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice still raw from the smoke. My truck is 2 miles north of here. From there, to a safe house. He led the way out of the narrow canyon. Ranger took up the rear guard position. The walk was agonizingly tense. The night woods were no longer still. Every gust of wind sounded like a footstep. Every shadow looked like a threat. Anna, still wrapped in Jack's oversized jacket, found herself struggling to keep up with his relentless pace. He moved with a purpose that was both terrifying and comforting. He wasn't just walking. He was patrolling. His head was on a slow, constant swivel, his senses tuned to the darkness. They reached his vehicle, parked in a deep gully that made it invisible from any road. It was a heavy-duty, dark gray pickup truck, utterly nondescript, but clearly modified for high performance. It was the truck of a man who didn't want to be noticed, but refused to be stopped. He opened the passenger door for Anna, then gave Ranger a silent hand signal. The dog leapt into the back of the extended cab, immediately sitting upright, his head perfectly framed in the rear window. He wasn't settling in for a ride. He was watching their six. Jack climbed into the driver's seat and the engine turned over with a low, powerful rumble. He didn't turn on the headlights. He drove the first 5 minutes using only the pale moonlight, navigating the rugged terrain from memory. Only when they reached an unmarked, paved access road did he flick on the lights, keeping them on low beam. The cab of the truck was warm, a welcome relief from the biting cold. As the adrenaline from the fire in the trek began to fade, a profound exhaustion washed over Anna. She watched Jack as he drove, his face partially illuminated by the dim green glow of the dashboard. He was silent, his focus absolute. She found herself studying the bond between him and his dog. Miles down the road, Jack spoke, his voice low. Ranger, rest. In the rearview mirror, Anna watched the dog give a single huff, circle once, and lie down, though she knew he wasn't truly sleeping. It was the simple, unspoken trust between them that struck her. She'd worked with K9 units before. She'd seen handlers and their dogs. This was different. This wasn't a man and his tool. It was a partnership, a bond forged so deep that words were unnecessary. This animal, this incredible lethal guardian, trusted Jack with his life. The thought settled in her mind. If this dog trusted him, then so could she. She leaned her head back against the headrest, fatigue pulling her down. The night's events felt like a surreal, gasoline-scented nightmare. Betrayed by her partner, left to burn, saved by a ghost in the woods, she felt her eyelids grow heavy. As she drifted in the space between consciousness and sleep, she noticed a small, repetitive movement. She cracked an eye open and watched. Every 30 seconds or so, Jack's eyes would flick from the dark road to the rearview mirror. He wasn't checking for traffic, there was none. He was checking on her. It was a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it resonated deep within her. It was the gesture of a guardian, a protector who had taken her under his care. It was done so subtly, so professionally that it wasn't personal, and yet it felt more personal than anything she'd experienced in a long time. She, the detective who prided herself on being the observer, was being watched over. She closed her eyes again, and for the first time in months, she let go. She woke as the truck slowed, the engine's rumble dropping. She sat up, disoriented. They were no longer in the woods. They were in a drab industrial park on the outskirts of a small Pennsylvania city, a neighborhood of silent warehouses and chain-link fences. Jack pulled up to a large, corrugated steel building, indistinguishable from the 50 others on the block. He hit a remote. A heavy steel door rolled up with a low, metallic groan, revealing a dark interior. He drove the truck inside and the door rolled down behind them, plunging them into absolute blackness. A moment later, a series of bright utility lights flickered on, illuminating a vast, cavernous space. Anna looked around, stunned. It looked like a mechanic's garage, but it was spotlessly clean, organized with military precision. Along one wall were racks of sealed containers, lockers, and a refrigerator. A small, curtained-off area suggested a cot and living space. Bolted to another wall was a sophisticated communications array. This wasn't a garage. It was a safe house. Jack killed the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening. "You'll be safe here," he said, finally turning to look at her. "There's a bathroom with a shower through that door. MREs in the fridge, water on the rack. Get some sleep." He started to get out, but Anna put a hand on his arm. The gauze on her wrist was rough against his sleeve. "You didn't answer my question out there, Jack." He paused, his hand on the door handle. "Vance Strategic," she pressed, her detective's mind locking onto the case. "The knife? You know who it is? You said Cal." Jack's shoulders slumped fractionally, the only sign of the immense weight that had just settled on him. He turned back, his steel-gray eyes finding hers in the harsh light of the warehouse. "Caleb Vance," Jack said, his voice quiet, the cold anger gone, replaced by a deep, weary pain. "We just called him Cal." He ran a hand over his face, the first sign of uncertainty she had seen in him. "He was my swim buddy and Bud/S, my teammate for 6 years. We pulled each other out of hell more times than I can count." He paused, the heavy implications hanging in the sterile air of the safe house. He looked at the combat knife still clipped to his belt, the symbol of betrayal. "He's not just a name on a company, Anna," Jack said, his voice raw. "He's my brother." The confession hung in the cold, sterile air of the warehouse, heavy and suffocating. "He's my brother." Anna stared at Jack, seeing for the first time not just a soldier, but a man staggered by betrayal. The implications were devastating. If Caleb Vance, Jack's brother, was supplying hitmen for Victor Sterling, this conspiracy ran deeper and was far more personal than she could have ever imagined. The rage in Jack's eyes had been replaced by a cold, desolate clarity. He had processed the impossible and moved on to the objective. "Stay here," he said, his voice flat. He walked to a large steel locker, keyed in a code, and it opened with a hydraulic hiss. He pulled out a compact pistol identical to his own, and a spare magazine. He set them on the workbench in front of her. "You know how to use this?" It was a statement, not a question. "Jack, I'm not a liability," Anna said, her voice finding its strength again. "I'm a cop. I can go with you. I should be the one too." "No," he cut her off, his tone allowing no argument. "You're the target. They think you're dead. We keep that advantage. And I don't know who he's with." He pointed to the communications array. "I'll be monitoring local police bands. If anything moves in this area, I'll know, but they won't." He tapped his ear. "It's a closed system." He turned to his four-legged partner. "Ranger, watch her." Ranger moved from the truck and sat at Anna's feet, his intelligent eyes fixed on her, a silent, 70-pound promise. Jack grabbed his keys, the Vance strategic knife still clipped to his belt, a tangible, painful reminder. "Bolt the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me." He didn't wait for a reply. He got in the truck, rolled up the heavy steel door, and was gone in a low rumble of exhaust, plunging the warehouse back into silence. Anna slid the massive steel bolt into place, the sound echoing in the empty space. The drive from the industrial park to the glittering heart of Pittsburgh was a journey through ghosts. Jack kept his mind locked on the mission, but memories were traitors, constantly breaching his defenses. He remembered Cal, younger, leaner, grinning as he pulled Jack over the wall on the Bud's obstacle course. He remembered Cal sharing his last MRE peanut butter packet in a freezing observation post. Cal, who had been the best man at his short-lived wedding. Cal, who had held his head in his hands when his marriage fell apart. Brotherhood in the teams wasn't just friendship. It was a covenant. A bond forged in shared misery and absolute trust. And that bond, it seemed, had just been sold. Vance Strategic Solutions wasn't in the main business district. It occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek, black glass tower just off the main artery, a building that exuded quiet, expensive power. Jack parked in the garage, his face an unreadable mask. He entered the lobby and took the elevator to the penthouse. The doors opened onto a walled-off reception area that looked more like a modern art gallery than an office. A woman sat at a glass desk, her blonde hair in a perfect, severe bun. She was sharp, wearing an expensive suit, and her smile was polite but impenetrable. She was the gatekeeper. "May I help you, sir? Mr. Vance is in a meeting." Jack walked past her desk as if she hadn't spoken. "Jack Corbin to see him. He'll want this meeting." The receptionist stood, her professional calm cracking. "Sir, you can't just." Jack didn't stop. He pushed through the heavy glass doors that led to the executive suite. He heard her protests, then the sound of her calling security, but he was already at the last door. He opened it. The office was vast. An entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the entire city, the rolling hills stretching out beyond. Caleb Cal Vance was standing by the window, his back to the door, a phone to his ear. He was no longer the wiry operator Jack remembered. He was broader, thicker, his power softened by expensive clothes. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Jack's truck. "I don't care about the margins. Just get the shipment cleared through customs," Cal was saying into the phone. He heard Jack enter and turned, a wide, disbelieving smile spreading across his face. "Jack, man, he stopped, his smile freezing. Jack didn't move. He just stood there, his face carved from granite. "Jack, what is it? What's wrong?" Cal put the phone down, his corporate polish fading, old instincts kicking in. He saw the look in Jack's eyes. It was the look he wore before a breach. "I'm gonna have to call you back," Cal said into the phone and hung up. "Jack, talk to me. You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," Jack said. He unclipped the Vance strategic knife from his belt. He took 3 steps and threw it. The knife spun end over end and embedded itself deep into the surface of Cal's massive, $10,000 mahogany desk. It quivered, a black accusation against the polished wood. Cal stared at the knife, the color draining from his face. "One of your guys dropped this," Jack said, his voice dangerously quiet. He dropped it while he was standing over a bound state trooper he'd just soaked in gasoline. He was about to strike the match when I stopped him. Cal recoiled, his hand flying to his mouth. "What? No. No, that's not possible." "Isn't it?" Jack took another step. "Or is it just not good for business? Tell me about Victor Sterling, Cal." At the name, Cal physically stumbled backward, hitting his desk. The facade of the powerful CEO shattered, revealing the terrified, cornered man beneath. I don't know who that is, Jack. I swear to you." "Don't," Jack commanded. "Don't lie. Not to me." "I didn't know," Cal screamed, his voice cracking. All the carefully constructed power was gone. "I swear on my kids' lives, Jack, I didn't know they were going to kill her. I move cargo. That's all I do. I just move cargo." "You move weapons for an arms dealer," Jack stated. "It wasn't supposed to be like that." Cal was frantic, pacing, running his hands through his hair. "Not at first. The company, Jack, you don't understand. The government contracts dried up. I was overleveraged. I had 50 people on payroll, families to feed. I was about to lose everything." He gestured around the opulent office. "All of this, it was all about to go under. So, you made a deal with Sterling. He found me. He offered me a logistics contract, just moving electronic components for a private client. It was easy money. It saved the company." Cal's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "By the time I realized what I was really moving, I was in too deep. I was compromised. He had me, Jack. He had my family, my company, everything. He said if I tried to pull out, he'd bury me." "So, you gave his hitman one of your knives?" Jack asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "No, he bought it, Sterling's whole team. They use my company as a cover. They buy my gear. I looked the other way." Cal finally collapsed into his leather chair, his face in his hands. "I just moved the boxes, Jack. I didn't know they were going to kill a cop. I'm not a murderer." Jack stared at the broken man, his former brother. He felt a profound sense of disgust. "You are what you tolerate, Cal." He turned and walked to the door, pulling the knife from the desk as he went. "Jack, wait," Cal cried, his voice small. "Where are you going? What are you going to do?" "He'll kill me. He'll kill my family." Jack paused at the door, his back to Cal. "You should have thought of that before you sold your soul. Stay out of my way." He left, leaving Cal alone in his glass tower. Back at the warehouse, the silence was a physical weight. Anna had found the small, Spartan bathroom and shower and had washed, the hot water stinging her skin but rinsing away the horrific smell of gasoline. It felt like a baptism, a cleansing of her own helplessness. She had found a spare black t-shirt and sweatpants Jack kept in a locker, and though they were huge, they were clean. She paced the vast concrete floor, her anxiety a tight knot in her stomach. She was a cop. Waiting was the hardest part of the job. She trusted Jack. His competence was undeniable, but she worried. He was walking into a situation compromised by emotion. He was confronting his brother. It was a blind spot, a deadly one. Ranger padded silently beside her, his presence a strange comfort. The dog was a mirror of his master, calm, alert, and radiating a quiet capability. She sat on a workbench, and the dog rested his heavy head on her knee, his warm, amber eyes watching her. She found herself stroking his broad head, his fur soft under her trembling fingers. "He's going to be okay, right, boy?" the dog just huffed, a warm breath on her hand. An hour later, the low rumble of the garage door sent her heart into her throat. She leapt off the bench, the pistol Jack had given her in her hands. She had her barrel trained on the opening. Ranger stood beside her, a low growl starting in his chest. The truck rolled in and the door closed behind it. Jack stepped out, and the relief that flooded through her was so sudden, so profound, it almost buckled her knees. She let out a long, shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, and lowered the weapon. The intensity of her reaction startled her. It was more than a teammate returning to base. It was the return of her anchor. He stepped into the light and her relief vanished. The cold rage he'd left with was gone. In its place was a heavy, bone-deep weariness that seemed to pull his entire frame down. He looked older. Jack. He stopped in front of her, his steel-gray eyes finding hers. You were right. It was Cal. He's in deep. He's Sterling's private logistics man. He confessed. He says he didn't know about the hit on you, but he's scared and he's compromised. So, what's next? Anna asked, her voice low. We can't trust him. We can't trust my department. Jack looked at the communications array, then back at her. No. We're on our own. He paused, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. Cal warned me. Sterling's team, they don't leave loose ends. They aren't just killers, they're hunters, and now they're hunting us. They aren't just hunters, Jack had said, his voice grim. They're hunters, and now they're hunting us. The words hung in the vast, cold, and heavy air of the warehouse. Anna's mind, trained by years on the force, immediately began calculating angles, exits, and choke points. The warehouse, which moments before had felt like a fortress, now felt like a steel trap. This place is a box, Jack, she said, her voice low. One way in, one way out. They'll come in heavy. No, Jack said, his eyes already distant, running calculations she couldn't see. One main entrance. There's a reinforced personnel door on the south wall, but it's... He was cut off by the shrill ring of his personal cell phone on the workbench. It wasn't the secure, encrypted comms system. It was his civilian line. He glanced at the screen. The name displayed. Cal. A flash of anger crossed Jack's face. He almost silenced it, but some chord of their shared past made him answer. He snatched up the phone, his voice like gravel. You have 5 seconds. Jack. Thank God. Cal's voice was a frantic, panting rush of pure panic. You have to get out of there. You have to run, right now. You already warned me, Jack said, his patience gone. No, you don't understand, Cal yelled. The hitman you got, the one in the woods, he had a tracker, a subcutaneous chip in his wrist. I didn't know, Jack. I swear I didn't know. Sterling's top guy, a man named Merrick. He pinged the chip. They know you have him. The blood in Jack's veins turned to ice. He's not with me. I left him in the canyon. A choked sound came from Cal's end. Oh God, that's worse. They'll have a team at the canyon in minutes. But Merrick, he's not just some thug. He's like us, Jack. He's ex-military, spec ops. He's smart and he's ruthless. He'll find the hitman. He'll know he was neutralized. And he'll backtrack. He'll find your truck's tracks. He'll trace you back to the city. Your warehouse. Is it clean? Jack didn't answer. He was already moving. His mistake hit him like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on Cal's emotional betrayal that he'd failed to analyze the tactical situation. He'd left a trail. As if summoned by Cal's warning, a new sound began. A low, haunting whistle from outside, seeping under the massive steel door. It was the wind, but it was changing, rising in pitch. A high-pitched shriek that spoke of immense pressure. Jack, are you there? Cal screamed through the phone. The storm's coming in, Jack said, moving to the main door. He could feel the air pressure changing inside the sealed warehouse. Dirt and gravel began to spray through the small gap at the foot of the roll-up door. It's your only chance. Cal's voice was desperate. Merrick will use the storm for cover. He'll be there with it. Get out. Get out now. The line went dead. Jack threw the phone on the bench just as a heavy, metallic thud echoed from the roof. It wasn't debris. It was the sound of a boot landing on steel. They're here, Jack said, his voice devoid of emotion. He pulled his rifle from its locker and threw a spare tactical vest to Anna. Put this on. It's plated. Grab the pistol. We're not fighting them. We're evading. Which way? Anna asked, her hands moving with practiced speed, her fear replaced by a cold rush of adrenaline. South door, Jack commanded. Ranger, heel. The dog was at his side, silent, his body coiled. Another thud from the roof, then another. They were deploying. Suddenly, a high-pitched, sizzling shriek ripped through the air from the main roll-up door. They were cutting the locking mechanism with a thermal torch. Too late, Jack hissed. Plan B this way. He grabbed Anna's arm and pulled her toward the dark corner of the warehouse where his truck was parked. Get low. The main lights in the warehouse suddenly went dead, plunging the cavernous space into absolute, oppressive darkness. Jack was ready. He hit the pressure switch on his rifle, and a brilliant white beam cut a cone through the gloom. Stay in my light. Boom. The main door didn't roll up. It blew inward, ripped from its tracks by a shaped charge. The explosion was deafening, a concussive wave that shook the concrete floor. At the same moment, the full fury of the windstorm that had been raging outside roared into the warehouse. It was an apocalyptic invasion, a solid, moving wall of gravel, rain, and debris that filled the air in a second. The sound was a constant, deafening shriek. Anna was blind, disoriented, her ears ringing from the blast. She couldn't see anything but a roiling, impenetrable cloud of brown. She felt grit stinging her face, filling her mouth, her eyes. Through the chaos, she saw them. Muted beams from weapon lights cutting through the dust like weak, ghostly fingers. Figures, maybe 4 or 5, were moving in, shapes distorted by the storm, their faces hidden by heavy goggles and masks. They were fanning out. A trained fire team, Merrick's team. A muzzle flash sparked in the gloom and a round whizzed past Anna's head, impacting the steel locker behind her with the sound of a giant hammer. She dropped into a crouch, her pistol up, but she was shooting at ghosts. Jack! She screamed, but her voice was ripped away by the wind. A hand clamped down on hers. It wasn't a pull or a grab. It was a connection. Jack's hand found hers in the absolute chaos, his fingers lacing through hers, his grip like a steel vice. It wasn't a comforting gesture. It wasn't romantic. It was a primal tactical command. It said, I have you. You are an extension of me. Where I go, you go. Do not let go. In that instant, as the world dissolved into noise and violence, a deep and absolute trust was forged. They were no longer a SEAL and a trooper. They were a single unit. Go, Jack roared, his voice cutting through the noise. He didn't pull her. He moved, and she moved with him, their joined hands the only anchor in the maelstrom. He didn't run for the side door. He ran away from it, toward the workbench. A figure loomed out of the dust, rifle up. Before Anna could even register the threat, Jack released her hand, shoved her behind him, and fired twice. 2 precise shots. The figure crumpled. In the same fluid motion, his hand found hers again. He pulled her down, sliding them both behind the heavy steel workbench as a volley of return fire ripped through the space they had just occupied. They're covering the exit. Jack yelled directly into her ear. The truck's a loss. We go through them. What? She screamed back, her eyes wide. Ranger, who had been a low, dark blur, suddenly launched himself from Jack's side. He tore through the roiling curtain of dust, barking a furious, distracting challenge. A weapon light snapped toward the sound, followed by a curse. Now. Jack pulled Anna to her feet. He was a different person. This was not the quiet, grieving man from Cal's office. This was a predator in his element. He moved with a terrifying speed and violence. He pulled her along, using the roiling grit as cover, his rifle light off. The enemy was blind. He was not. He knew every inch of this floor. They skirted the edge of the firefight. Jack guided her around racks and containers. One of Merrick's men stepped directly into their path. Ranger was on him in a heartbeat, a blur of teeth and fury that dragged the man down. Jack didn't even slow. He just pulled Anna past the melee. They reached the blown-out main entrance. The storm was a solid wall of rain and grit, a roaring horizontal blizzard that rendered the outside world invisible. Hold your breath. Close your eyes, Jack yelled. He pulled her out of the warehouse and into the heart of the tempest. The wind hit them like a physical blow, nearly knocking them from their feet. It was impossible to see. Impossible to breathe. The grit was a living thing, scouring their skin, trying to invade their lungs. This way, Jack's voice was a faint thing, but his grip was iron. He plunged them down the block, disappearing into the raging, black heart of the Pennsylvania storm. Behind them, they heard muffled shouts, the crack of a few hopeless shots, but the sound was swallowed instantly. They were ghosts. They were free, and they were utterly blind, walking with nothing but each other, a dog, and the clothes on their backs. The world outside the warehouse wasn't a place. It was a force. The storm raged with a deafening, primal roar, a solid wall of grit and chaos that scoured the industrial park. Visibility was zero. It was a tactical nightmare, but for Jack, it was cover. His hand was still locked with Anna's, a non-negotiable anchor in the roiling, brown vortex. She couldn't see him. She couldn't see anything. She squeezed her eyes shut, head down, breathing through the sleeve of the jacket Jack had given her. Her entire world had been reduced to his iron grip and the steady, relentless pull that guided her. She stumbled, her feet catching on unseen debris, but he didn't let her fall. His grip just tightened, pulling her upright, and they kept moving. Beside them, a low, dark shape pressed against Jack's other leg. It was Ranger, head down, using his body as a shield for his master, his paws moving with unshakable confidence. He was a living compass, unaffected by the storm. They weren't running blindly. Anna realized Jack was navigating. He was counting his steps, making sharp, 90-degree turns. He was moving through alleys and between buildings she didn't know existed. He was a ghost in his own city, and he was taking her with him into the dark. The air was unbreathable. The sound was a constant, painful shriek that felt like it was tearing at her skull. She focused on the only thing left, the steady, powerful pulse she could feel through Jack's grip. After what felt like an eternity, the roar of the wind lessened, muffled as if they had stepped behind a massive wall. Jack stopped and she collided with his back. He released her hand. The sudden loss of contact was terrifying, and she almost cried out. "Stay," he commanded, his voice barely audible. She heard a metallic scraping, then the heavy thud of a steel bar being lifted. A low, groaning squeal followed, and a rectangle of deeper blackness opened in the wall of grit. Inside, now. He pushed her through the opening. She stumbled down 2 concrete steps and onto a flat floor. Ranger shot in after her. Jack followed, and with a tremendous, grunting effort, he hauled the heavy steel door shut. The sound of the storm was instantly severed, as if a plug had been pulled. The silence was total, heavy, almost as loud as the wind had been. Anna leaned against the cold concrete wall, her lungs burning, coughing violently to clear the dust. A single, dim emergency light flickered on, illuminating a low-ceilinged room. It smelled of damp concrete, ozone, and old dust. It was a bunker. It was Spartan, a few metal cots, sealed crates of supplies, and a large, outdated communications array. "Where are we?" she rasped, her throat raw. "Cold War," Jack said. He was already checking the seals on the door. "Old civil defense shelter. Runs underneath the flood control channels." He turned, his face caked in grime, his eyes the only clear thing in the dim light. "How are you?" His voice was different in the silence. The hard edge of the commander was gone, replaced by a low, concerned tone. She could taste grit on her teeth. "I'm alive." "How did you know?" "I know the bones of this city," he said simply. He went to a crate and pulled out 2 bottles of water, handing one to her. She drank, the water scouring her throat clean. As the adrenaline began to fade, the sheer terror of the last few minutes hit her. She watched Jack, who was calmly checking his rifle, his movements fluid and efficient. A low, menacing growl ripped through the silence. Ranger, who had been sitting by the door, was now on his feet, his gaze locked on a dark corner of the bunker, his teeth bared. Jack's rifle was up in a flash, his body shielding Anna. "Show yourself. Last chance." A figure stepped out from behind a concrete support pillar, hands raised high. "Don't shoot, Jack. It's me." It was Caleb Vance. He was a wreck. His expensive suit was ruined, covered in concrete dust. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a frantic, desperate energy. He wasn't the polished CEO. He was the terrified man from the office. Anna's pistol was in her hand, leveled at his center mass. "Jack, he led them here." "I didn't," Cal cried. "I swear I didn't." Jack held his rifle steady, his eyes like ice. "Why are you here, Cal?" "I knew you'd come here," Cal said, his voice raw. This was our old fallback point. Remember, from the old days? I came here after you left. I didn't know what else to do. I heard the breach on the comms. I heard the shooting. I thought you were dead, both of you." "That doesn't answer the question," Jack said. "I'm here to fix this." The words tumbled out of Cal in a rush. "To make it right." He was shaking, not from cold, but from sheer terror. "Merrick, the man hunting you, he's not just a soldier. He's Sterling's executioner. He finds problems and he erases them. And right now, we're the problem." "There is no we," Jack said. "Please." Cal took a half step forward and Ranger's growl deepened, stopping him in his tracks. "I was a coward. I was greedy and I was wrong. But I am not going to let him win. I am not going to let him kill you." He fumbled in his jacket pocket and produced a small, encrypted USB drive. "This is everything I have. My company's books, Sterling Shell Corporation's, the shipping manifests. It's enough to tie him to the weapons, but it's not the real proof. Anna lowered her pistol slightly, her detective's curiosity taking over. What do you mean, not the real proof? Cal looked at her, his eyes pleading for them to believe him. Sterling is paranoid. He's old school. He doesn't believe in the cloud. No digital networks. He keeps a master server, a physical hard drive, air-gapped from everything. He listed the items on his fingers. Every arms deal, every serial number, every bank transfer. And, he paused, his voice dropping, every name on his payroll, cops, judges, politicians. He calls it his insurance policy. A heavy silence filled the bunker. This was it, the key to the entire conspiracy. Where is it? Jack asked, his voice flat. An abandoned private airfield north of the city near the edge of the mountains, a place called Desert Sky. The hangars are supposed to be empty, but he uses the main one as his base of operations. His voice cracked. It's a fortress. It's where Merrick and his team live. Jack and Anna exchanged a look. It's a trap, Anna said. No, Cal said, shaking his head. It's a departure. He's spooked. The hit on you failed. A SEAL, he looked at Jack, shows up. He's pulling out. He's cleaning house. He's flying out of that airfield tonight and he's taking that server with him. If that plane takes off, he's gone forever. The three of them stood in the dim green light of the bunker. The only sound was the faint hum of the air filter. Anna looked at Jack, her face pale but determined. This is impossible, Jack. A reinforced hangar. Merrick's entire team of operators. They'll be dug in, waiting for anything. And we're just. She glanced at Cal with unconcealed suspicion. We're just two people, and him. Cal flinched but said nothing. He knew he deserved it. It's a suicide mission, Anna concluded, her voice low. Jack was silent for a long moment. He dropped the magazine from his rifle, checked the rounds with a practiced thumb, and slapped it back in with a solid click. He looked up, and his steel-gray eyes locked on hers. The weariness was gone. The cold rage was gone. All that was left was the diamond-hard focus she had seen in the woods. It's only a suicide mission if we fail, he said simply. He stepped closer to her, into her personal space. You're a detective, Anna. You see the angles, you see the case. I'm an operator. I see entry points and weaknesses. And Cal, he glanced at his former teammate, knows the layout. He knows the security systems. He turned back to her and his gaze softened, just a fraction. He saw the doubt, the logical, justifiable fear. He reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. The gesture was solid, steady, a transmission of strength, the fabric of his jacket still warm on her from his body heat. Not if we trust each other, he said, his voice low and firm, meant only for her. I trust you, Anna. I trusted you with my back in that warehouse. Do you trust me? She looked at his hand on her shoulder, then up at his face. She remembered his iron grip in the storm, the way he had pulled her from the fire, the way he had checked on her in the truck. He was asking her to take a blind leap with him. She gave a single, decisive nod. I trust you. He held her gaze for another beat, a silent, binding contract. He gave her shoulder one squeeze. Good. He turned, all business, to his former brother. Cal, pull up the schematics for that hangar. We're going in tonight. The silence of the bunker was a tightly coiled spring. Caleb Vance, his face pale and sweating, stood before a flickering laptop, displaying the layout of the Desert Sky airfield. It's a fortress. Jack, cameras, pressure plates, and Merrick's private army. But there's one flaw. He never fixed the old flood culvert. It runs from this channel network right under the east wall of the main hangar. Jack absorbed the data, his mind processing the blueprints with a cold, terrifying efficiency. He checked his rifle, handed a spare magazine to Anna, his eyes meeting hers, and in the dim green light, he saw no fear. He saw a cop, a warrior. Ready for this? She slid the magazine into her vest, her movements sure. Let's end this. They moved out, a team of 4. Jack led, taking them into the dark, dripping confines of the flood channel. The air was cold, smelling of damp earth and rust. Anna was right behind him, pistol in hand. Cal followed, clutching the drive containing his confession. His face was a mask of adrenaline-fueled terror. Ranger moved at the rear, a silent guardian, his paws patting on the concrete. Their journey was a tense, agonizing crawl through the darkness. The only sounds were the distant drip of water and their own breathing. After 30 minutes, Jack held up a hand. He pointed up. A rusted iron ladder was bolted to the wall. At the top was a heavy, circular grate. Jack climbed it in silence, pressing his ear to the metal. He motioned them up. One by one they climbed. Jack applied pressure to the grate and it lifted with a low, metallic groan that was masked by the distant desert wind. They emerged into a world of cold stars and shadow. The airfield stretched out before them. It was exactly as Cal had described. A massive black hangar sat in the center of a wide tarmac. The main doors were closed, but lights blazed from within. At the far end of the runway, a large, dark cargo plane, a C-130, sat waiting, its ramp down, a clear exit route. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. There, Cal whispered, pointing to a small, nondescript personnel door on the side of the hangar that led to the operations floor. Server room is second floor. Mezzanine overlooking the main floor. Jack didn't need to be told twice. He was a phantom, melting into the shadows cast by the airfield lights. He moved along the fence line, Ranger a living extension of his own shadow. A lone guard stood near the door, stamping his feet against the cold. Jack was on him before the man could turn his head. It was silent, fast, and final. The man crumpled. Jack gave the signal. Clear. Anna, Cal, and Ranger sprinted across the exposed tarmac, their hearts hammering. Jack opened the door and they slipped inside. The hangar's interior was vast, a cathedral of steel and jet fuel. The cargo plane was being loaded with sealed black crates, moved by forklifts. Men in black tactical gear, Merrick's team, moved with brutal efficiency, their voices sharp commands. Up there, Cal pointed to a glass-walled office set into the wall 20 feet above the floor. They took the metal stairs, Jack and Ranger in the lead, clearing the landing. The server room was unlocked. Cal rushed to the main terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Anna stood beside him, her pistol drawn, watching his back. I'm in, Cal breathed. Sterling's system is arrogant. He thinks no one can touch him. I'm starting the data transfer. Oh no. What? Anna hissed. It's huge. The server is copying, but it's going to take 10, maybe 15 minutes. We don't have 15 minutes, Jack said. He and Ranger were at the window, a dark silhouette against the bright hangar floor. He watched the men below, his eyes searching for the one Cal had described. A man stopped. He was different from the others. Taller, moving with a predatory grace, his rifle held with the ease of an expert. This was Merrick, the ex-operator, the enforcer. He didn't shout. He just paused. And slowly, as if he'd smelled a change in the air, his head tilted up. His eyes, even from this distance, locked onto the server room window. He raised a hand and pointed. We're made, Jack said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Cal, secure that drive. The hangar exploded into action. Alarms blared. Men shouted. The metal door to the server room burst open, and two of Merrick's men charged in. Ranger met them before they could raise their rifles. He was a black and tan blur, a force of contained fury, driving the first man back into the hallway. Jack engaged the second, his rifle spitting short, controlled bursts. The fight was close, brutal. Anna, with her training, provided cover fire, allowing Jack to gain the upper hand. But more footsteps were pounding up the stairs. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the gunfire. It wasn't a shout. It was a cold, clear command. Enough. The firing stopped. The hangar door was rolling open and a man was stepping inside. He was not a soldier. He was in his late 50s with perfectly styled silver hair, wearing a flawlessly tailored black suit. This was Victor Sterling. He radiated a cold, absolute authority, his face calm, almost bored, as if he were being bothered by a minor inconvenience. He looked at the firefight on the mezzanine. He saw Cal at the server. He saw Jack, a threat he hadn't anticipated. And then his eyes settled on Anna. His face, which had been passive, tightened. The loose end, the ghost who had started this entire mess. You, he said, his voice amplified by the hangar. You have caused me a great deal of trouble, trooper. He calmly reached inside his suit jacket and drew a gleaming, silver-plated pistol. He wasn't aiming at Jack, who was still occupied by Merrick's men at the door. He was aiming directly at Anna. Jack saw it. He was too far, his path blocked. Anna, look out. He roared. Sterling's arm extended, his finger tightening on the trigger. Time stopped. Ranger, who had just neutralized his target, saw the threat. He saw Anna, the woman he'd been tasked to protect. He saw the gun. He launched. He didn't bark. He didn't hesitate. He threw himself through the air, a projectile of pure loyalty, covering the 10 feet between himself and Anna in a single, desperate leap. The pistol fired. Ranger yelped, a piercing, agonized sound that cut through every heart. The bullet intended for Anna's chest slammed into the dog's shoulder, throwing him sideways. He hit the main server rack with a heavy, sickening thud and collapsed to the steel floor. A dark, wet patch immediately began to spread across his coat. Silence. Anna screamed. It wasn't a sound of fear. It was a raw, broken cry of anguish. Victor Sterling stood frozen, his pistol still raised. His cold, calculating mind had stalled. He had accounted for everything, the betrayal, the security, the escape. He had not accounted for this. This irrational, animal act of sacrifice. That moment of stunned inaction was his last. Jack, seeing his partner fall, was consumed by a white-hot, righteous fury. He exploded from his position. He crossed the room in 3 strides. He didn't fire his rifle. He hit Sterling. It wasn't a fight. It was an ending. The butt of his rifle smashed into Sterling's wrist, and the sound of bone breaking echoed the earlier pistol shot. The silver gun clattered to the floor. Before Sterling could even register the pain, Jack's hand was at his throat, slamming him against the wall, lifting him off the ground. Sterling's face turned purple, his eyes wide with a shock he'd never known. Jack didn't kill him, he just held him there, a silent, terrifying judgment, until the fight went out of his eyes, and he slumped, unconscious. Caleb, who had instinctively shielded the server with his own body during the firefight, looked at the progress bar. 99%. 100%. He ripped the hard drive from its port, holding it up like a trophy. Got it, Jack. I got it. But Jack didn't hear him. The fight was over. The alarms were still blaring. Merrick and the rest of his men, seeing their boss fall, were in full retreat, melting into the night. Jack and Anna didn't see them. Their eyes were fixed on the dark, still shape on the floor. Anna was already on her knees, skidding on the metal, her hands hovering over the wound. Ranger. Oh God, Ranger, please. Jack rushed to her side, dropping his rifle, his face a mask of agony. He pressed his hand to the wound, feeling the hot, fast flow of blood. The dog whimpered, a small, pained sound, his amber eyes finding Jack's. Stay with me, boy, Jack whispered, his voice cracking. Stay with me. The blaring alarms were a distant, irrelevant scream. The vast, cold hangar that moments before had been a battlefield had shrunk to the small, desperate space on the steel mezzanine floor. Jack's world was nothing but the hot, slick feel of blood under his hands and the shallow, ragged breaths of his partner. No, no, no. Anna knelt beside him, her face a mask of anguish. Jack, he's bleeding so fast. Jack didn't answer. The SEAL, the warrior, was gone, replaced by the field medic, his focus absolute. Pressure, he ordered, his voice raw. Right here. Press as hard as you can. He tore his individual first aid kit from his vest, his hands moving with a speed that defied the horror of the moment. He pulled out a packet of combat gauze and a chest seal. I need to seal the entry. It's A through and through. He worked with a desperate, precise calm. His face was inches from Ranger's, his whispers for the dog alone. Stay with me, boy. You don't get to leave me. Stay. Ranger whimpered, a high, thin sound of pain. His amber eyes were locked on Jack's. Caleb Vance stood frozen. The small black hard drive was clutched in his hand like a useless relic. He was staring at the unconscious form of Victor Sterling, then at the spreading pool of blood. Jack. God. Merrick's men are gone. What do we do? Make the call, Jack grunted, his arm slick with blood as he packed the gauze. 911. The cops. Jack. We can't. No, Anna said, her voice trembling, but her mind was working again. She snatched Cal's phone. Give me this. I know who to call. Her fingers, slick with Ranger's blood, tapped out a number. Director Hayes, this is Trooper Anna Riley. I'm at the Desert Sky Airfield north of the mountains. I am declaring a broken arrow on a federal target. We have Victor Sterling. I repeat, we have Sterling, and we have his entire ledger. Send everyone. And, her voice broke, send a medic, we have an officer down, a K-9 officer. He's critical. Jack didn't look up. He had stripped off his own shirt, pressing the thick, dry fabric to the exit wound, trying to slow the bleeding. Hang on, Ranger. Hang on. It felt like a lifetime. It had been 12 minutes. The night outside the open hangar doors lit up with a swarm of red and blue lights. But these were not state police cruisers. A convoy of heavy, black federal SUVs roared onto the tarmac, surrounding the hangar. Doors flew open and agents poured out, their weapons at the low ready. They fanned out, securing the perimeter, their movements a display of overwhelming force. A woman strode through the middle of them, her presence parting the tactical teams like water. This was Director Hayes. She was a tall woman in her 50s. Her iron-gray hair was in a severe bun. She wore a federal windbreaker and her sharp, intelligent eyes took in the entire scene in a single glance, the unconscious arms dealer in cuffs, the trembling ex-SEAL, the wounded dog, and the two blood-soaked, exhausted figures kneeling over him. "Trooper Riley," Hayes said, her voice crisp and commanding. "You've been busy." "It's Sterling, Director," Anna said, not taking her eyes off Ranger. "Caleb Vance, his logistics man, has the server. He's cooperating." Cal stepped forward, pale and shaking, holding out the drive. "It's all there. I'll testify. I'll tell you everything." "Agents, secure the asset," Hayes commanded. "Get Sterling on his feet. I want him on a transport 10 minutes ago." Then she looked at Jack. She saw the blood, the uniform pants, and the look of pure, focused agony on his face. She saw the dog. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Medic." A field agent with a trauma bag rushed forward. Jack looked up, his eyes blazing. "Not you. I need a surgeon. A vet surgeon, now, or he's going to die." Hayes didn't hesitate. She keyed her radio. "This is Director Hayes. I'm commandeering a life flight helicopter. I have a critical K-9 officer, multiple gunshot wounds. I need priority transport to the Las Vegas Veterinary Emergency Center. Get me Dr. Aris on the line. Tell him we're inbound." Jack gently, so gently, slid his arms under Ranger, lifting his partner. He rose to his feet, the dog's heavy, limp form cradled in his arms. He walked past the federal agents, past the cuffed Victor Sterling, past Caleb Vance. He was a man on a single, sacred mission. "Jack," Anna said, rushing to his side. He didn't stop. He walked out onto the tarmac toward the approaching helicopter, its rotors already beating against the cold desert air. The waiting room was sterile, pale green, and smelled of disinfectant and floor wax. It was the quietest place Jack had ever been, and it was deafening. He sat on a hard plastic chair, his arms still stained, his shirt gone. He had sat there, unmoving, for 4 hours. Anna sat beside him. She had given her statement to Hayes, her hands and face were clean now, but she was still wearing Jack's bloodstained tactical jacket. She had refused to take it off. She held 2 cups of vending machine coffee, one of which sat untouched on her lap. They hadn't spoken. There was nothing to say. Everything that mattered was in the room behind the steel surgical doors. Finally, Anna broke the silence. Hayes called. "They're processing the drive. It's everything. More than we dreamed. Not just Sterling. It's senators, police chiefs, my old partner." Jack just stared at the doors. "Cal," she continued softly. "He's in federal protection. He gave them everything. With his testimony, he'll get a reduced sentence. He'll be safe. His family will be safe." Jack nodded. A small, tight movement. It was data, nothing more. The doors finally swung open. A man in gray scrubs, his mask dangling around his neck, walked out, rubbing his eyes. He looked exhausted, but kind. This was Dr. Aris, a man with a reputation for performing surgical miracles on animals. Jack was on his feet instantly, his entire body rigid. "My dog." Dr. Aris looked at this intense, bare-chested man covered in dried blood, and a small, tired smile touched his lips. The bullet, it did a lot of damage. It shattered his scapula. It missed his pulmonary artery by 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters. Anna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "He is," the doctor said, "incredibly tough, and impossibly lucky. He lost a lot of blood and the next 48 hours are critical, but the surgery was a success. He's stable. He's resting." Jack said nothing. He visibly sagged, his legs almost buckling. He leaned against the wall, his head bowed, as 4 hours of agonizing, suffocating tension left him in a silent flood. Kate stepped forward, her hand on his arm, and she felt the coiled muscles of his frame, finally relax. 3 days later, the sun was rising over the Allegheny Mountains, painting the sky in soft pinks and brilliant oranges. But they weren't in the woods. They were in a quiet, bright recovery room where the only sound was the faint, rhythmic beep of a monitor. Ranger was lying on a soft bed. His shoulder and chest were heavily bandaged, and an A4 line ran to his leg, but his eyes were open. They were clear. As the door opened, his tail gave a single, Weak thump. Jack knelt by the bed, his hand resting gently on Ranger's broad head. "Hey, bud," he whispered, his voice thick. "You scared me. Don't you ever do that again." Anna knelt beside him. She was back in her own clothes, her face bruised, but her eyes were clear. She looked at the animal who had taken a bullet for her. "He's a hero," she said softly. She reached out, her fingers stroking the soft fur on Ranger's neck. "Thank you. Thank you for saving me." Her hand rested on the dog's fur, right next to Jack's. The silence in the room was warm, filled with a new, shared peace. Then, Anna made a simple move. She slid her hand over his, covering the back of Jack's hand with her own. It was a gesture of profound, wordless gratitude. It was for her life. It was for his sacrifice. It was for everything. Jack was still, and then slowly he turned his hand under hers, his fingers lacing through hers. It was a strong, warm, solid grip. They looked at each other, really looked, for the first time. The chaos of the fire, the storm, and the hangar was gone. All that was left was the truth. His sacrifice and the loyalty of the hero between them had forged a bond that no bullet could ever break. The new dawn, bright and full of promise, streamed in through the window.